Well, I've actually sent an email to the Chief Executive today saying, stop this right now. This is nonsense.
This is Funder. When you subscribe, you learn how to turn knowledge into money. Councils are steering at infrastructure they cannot afford to maintain. Rate caps are squeezing budgets to the bone. Debt is rising. Pipes are raging. Roads are cracking. Services are shrinking. The central government promises discipline while local government braces for failure. People call it fiscal management. It feels more like slow motion collapse. Today we ask the question everyone else avoids. Is New Zealand heading for a fiscal meltdown? Is something about to break? To cut through the noise, we've brought in someone who has lived it from both sides of the table. A former cabinet minister, a current Auckland councillor, a man who understands exactly where the cracks form before the public ever sees them. Maurice Williamson. Maurice, the coalition is capping council rates around 2 to 4%. Are they protecting ratepayers or are they forcing councils to under-maintain the assets?
Look, this issue is not binary, yes or no, by any stretch of the imagination. There is a good case to be argued on both sides. For example, let's take the government. How come they don't pay rates on any of their huge land holdings here in Auckland? They own huge swathes of land and don't pay rates. And then they say to us, you can't keep putting the rates up for all the others. Well, how about you pay rates, Mr. Government? That would be a good idea, like other people have to. I'd even go as far as the churches. How about you start paying rates on all the land you hold? Because others are having to pay for yours, and I don't like others paying for yours. So there's your first one. The second one is the government almost by the month comes up with a new set of rules that councils have to do. The whole waste management strategy they put in place have forced us into going to those stupid little food scraps bins, and they're now looking to go to fortnightly rubbish collection because you're not allowed to aggregate more than so many tons of rubbish because we've got to have this waste minimisation. Again, government policy, we're told we have to do it. There is, I will spend the rest of this whole podcast listing you things. I'll finish my best one. A whole temporary traffic management document that was 600 pages about how many thousand cones you must put out when you're fixing a leaking water main somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, those are costs that just burdened us down, but we had to do them because they are government policies. So it's a bit rich for them. I also did some numbers today about what the total tax take has done over the last 5 years. That is central government's rates, really. I think their tax income is the same as our rates income. It's gone up 49.5% over 5 years. Divide that by 5, it's about 8% per annum. That's a hell of a lot more than their 2% or 4% they're going to grant. So how about they put 2 to 4% tax cap
on themselves? Yeah.
That would be a good idea. I'd vote for that. Now, having said all that, go to the other side of the debate. We've still got huge amount of wastage in our operation. There is still a huge amount of strengthening of our procurement regime where we can get better pricing and so on. When you see a set of concrete stairs at Milford Beach built for $800,000 when you could build the damn thing for about $80,000 or $80,000 compared to the $800,000. So there is plenty of examples where there's wastage and where we could do better. But I just find it a bit rich, somebody who's got a very large revenue growing scheme who puts all the rules on us. We don't put any rules on them. They put all them on us. You must do this. You must do that. They made us change all the speed limits around the city, not the current government, but the government did. We had to go and spend a whole lot of money taking all the signs down and redoing them and now take them back. Well, they want to keep changing those rules, adding cost to it. I'd love to run 2 separate sets of books. One that's us costing us and another set that says this is the government's costs that they've forced upon you, and we'll put it into your rates bill where you see we're charging you this much for city for the city and this much for government rates.
So if we look at a middle ground, one of the biggest problems with council is the infrastructure spending doesn't get done.
Yep.
Does that need to be centralised, and that's going to fix half the problem? And
well,
depoliticised.
There's without doubt there's 2 forms of spending. And everyone's got to understand that, OPEX and CAPEX. Operational is where you're spending today, which you've got to spend again tomorrow and spend again. So mowing the parks and a whole lot of things that council does and has to do again and again. CapEx is a capital expenditure where you're going and putting money into a big piece of infrastructure. That's an investment that will have a long-term payoff for the economy and for the council and so on. And if I give an ordinary viewer the option, most people didn't buy their house with cash. They took a loan by way of a mortgage. They got the benefits of that for the whole of the life they had it. They increased its value over time, etc. So I don't mind capital expenditure that's been causing debt in order to get the benefits and long-term retire the debt from the revenue streams you can get. What I'm really concerned about is the OPEX side of our books still need a blowtorch in certain areas where the waste goes beyond belief. There was a man on News Talk ZB yesterday who called in, said he'd been a local board member of Auckland Council for a couple of terms, and he said they wanted to put a little hand basin with a squirter of water at the swimming pool that they were changing. They went and got the council to bid for it, and the council came back and said, yes, 22,000. And then he said, well, I'm on the board of a local high school, and we've just done it in our toilet blocks and so on, and it was 1,500 for the unit, and it cost 2,000 fully up when installed. How come it cost 2 compared to 22? And the answer was, oh, well, there's a lot of things you're not taking account. He looked at the layout, the schedule, 4,000 of it was temporary traffic management.
Far out for
4,000 for a squirty little tap. Temporary traffic management. So yes, we can do a lot better. And and if anyone from the Auckland Council says we're at peak performance, there is no wastage, we're doing a brilliant job, then don't believe them. There's still a lot more room to go. But it's a bit rich for somebody who's not prepared to take a 2 to 4% cap on their income and not prepared to stop putting extra costs onto us that we've got to pass on and then say it's your fault.
And if we look at some of the problems with council's bureaucracy, we've heard of issues with consents lately. McDonald's up the road, for example, hasn't been able to replace what was burnt down. What is going on that there's so many stages for consent that paper gets pushed around for months, even years at council? That's
the area where we are having to, the mayor is literally saying, dumb stuff, stop this. And he actually picks up the phone to the chief executive and said, I want this shit dealt to right now. And that McDonald's was a great example. They wanted to replace like with like. If it hadn't burnt down, it would still be there today operating as a burger outlet. They wanted to put the same building back on a site where the fire had taken it down. And it just went round and round. So I got involved. I emailed some of the senior officials and I said, you fix this and you fix this now. And they did. Now, one that's just been raised with me is hilarious today, just today. Guy emails in out of the blue, don't know him, said, every year we do this big fundraiser by having auctions and we have to have a huge marquee that we put up to do. It's over 100 square metres, so there's all sorts of requirements to meet consents to put this marquee up for the one day to have this. We raised a lot of money for, poor and the disadvantaged or whoever. I can't remember what it was. Every year they've got to get a consent and the council puts them back through the ringer to get a consent for that same marquee at the same location. How about you just said, do it once. Yes, it's safe. It's fine. Bang. There you got a 20-year consent. Come back and see us then to make sure it's still safe and not going to fall.
It will be interesting to see what the cost of the consent is versus the cost of the fine.
Well, I've actually sent an email to the chief executive today saying, stop this right now. This is nonsense.
Most people treat their KiwiSaver the way they treat an old photo album. They know it exists, they know it matters, they never bother to open it. And that small act of neglect can cost them more than they realize. If you want clear, simple guidance on choosing the right provider and the right type of fund, you can talk to Wealth HQ without paying a cent. Maybe you like the thrill of crypto. Maybe you want nothing to do with investments that profit from conflict. Maybe you just want a sense of control over where your money goes. Wealth HQ strips the uncertainty out of the process. If you want to understand your options, then click the link below and it will take you there. Well, if we look at the proposed capital gains tax from the other side of the house, Labour says capital gains tax is going to fund services and fairness. ACT is saying taxes are going to creep and be complex and it's going to hurt growth. What's your view? You've been there. You've seen around the world what they're doing.
I'm totally opposed to capital gains taxes. I think that they've got more holes in them than a block of Swiss cheese. You can drive a tractor through them if you're smart. You can put properties into various ownerships and so on and avoid it. But it's really a stupid thing, especially if you don't allow it for inflation. You buy a house for 100,000 and 5 years later or 10 years later it's worth 200,000 and you sell it and you pay tax on the 100,000, but you can't buy another property the same but for 200,000.
Yeah.
Hang on, that's wrong. So at least allow the inflation correction. If I don't want to give it any credence, but if I was going to fix some things, that would be one I'd fix. But I have to say it's hilarious, the Labour Party. They said, first announcement, this will fund 3 free doctor's visits for everybody. So Jack Kane says to Barbara Edmonds, you just said some people can't afford to go to the doctor. And she says, yes. How many? She said about 1 in every 6 people cannot afford to go to the doctor. So he says, well, immediately that says 5 out of 6 can afford to go to the doctor, and you're going to make it free for them.
Yeah, ridiculous.
Makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. But the real kicker for capital gains for Labour is every new policy now, they released one last weekend, which was going to be a fund for interest-free loans to doctors. That's going to come out of the capital gains tax. Hang on. When you originally launched the capital gains tax for just the free visits, it wasn't enough to cover them for the first few years. It was going to take till year 3, and there'd have to be a little bit of jiggery. So are there more arms to the capital gains tax we don't know about yet? That's a legitimate question.
Yeah.
Or how can you sort of get blood out of a stone? There is not enough money coming out to pay for the first of the promises. And I bet you there'll be even more election promises that we'll fund from the capital gains tax.
Yeah, well, capital gains tax has to come from a gain. So if there's no gain, there will be no capital gains tax.
Well, there'll be a capital loss refund, hopefully. You buy a house for 200,000 and sell it for 100,000 when the times are tough. You'll get a tax rebate on the...
Australia's capital gains tax is used as example. They have it, we should have it. They don't make that much money from it.
No, and it didn't stop the house price spiking, didn't do anything that it was supposed to do. I am just a total opponent of capital gains tax.
But if we look at taxes as a way to make things more equal, what are effective taxes to help balance for those that have versus those that don't have?
Well, I'm quite a fan of flat rate taxes, and I'm quite a fan of consumption. You shouldn't tax goods, you should tax bads. Earning an income is a good. And the more people should earn, I think that's great. Spending that on a new Ferrari or something is a bad, in my view. There should be a tax associated with it. And the other thing is, if you make those rates too high, the really wealthy end of town know ways to avoid it all.
Yeah.
And they do it. There are all sorts of shell companies and corporate entities and moving assets around and having trusts that hold this and do. It's really easy because they've got lawyers and accountants advising them. But nearly every really wealthy person I've ever spoken to said, if the taxation rate was at a 20% flat rate on everything, that's it, nothing. I'd pay my share. I'd happily pay my share. But while you want to soak unbelievable percentage out of us at one end, where the whole lot of people at the bottom end are not even paying for it, we'll just adjust our affairs so you don't get anything.
More than 80% of the tax will be paid by a middle 20% of certain earners in that 100 to 150K.
Well, I've got a spreadsheet which I'll hope to bring on another program and show you. But one of the things people miss out when they look at the taxation, they go, oh, this percentage in the higher echelon pay 28% or 36% of tax, and these people only pay that. Those numbers are wrong for the following reason. These people down in the lower income levels get a whole lot of transfers back to them by way of working for families and all sorts of other subsidies.
So we should just take away the subsidies.
So what I did is I put an extra column which had the net migration of money back and then moved it over. And the numbers in the top echelon, they pay like 70% of the total income tax because net is what they're paying. It doesn't matter if you pay $58,000 in tax and get $30,000 of that back, you only pay $28,000.
Maurice Williamson, Auckland Councillor, thanks for your time. Appreciate your insights, and we'll see you again soon. Most people treat their KiwiSaver the way they treat an old photo album. They know it exists, they know it matters, they never bother to open it. And that small act of neglect can cost them more than they realize. If you want clear, simple guidance on choosing the right provider and the right type of fund, you can talk to Wealth HQ without paying a cent. Maybe you like the thrill of crypto. Maybe you want nothing to do with investments that profit from conflict. Maybe you just want a sense of control over where your money goes. Wealth HQ strips the uncertainty out of the process. If you want to understand your options, then click the link below and it will take you there.